Okay, so let's begin this session. So, first of all, a very heartedly good morning to one and all present here. I, Aditi Govil, feel privileged to extend my warm welcome to all of you. The National Service Scheme IIT Roorkee is the student chapter of NSS, a public service program run by the Government of India. And we are a team with over 1,000 active and dedicated members having a common goal: striving for the betterment of our motherland by fully indulging ourselves in the service of mankind. We organize multiple events, campaigns, and guest lectures to spread awareness about societal issues. And we work for the betterment of society following our motto, not for me, but for the nation. So, one of the significant issues we are currently focusing on is road safety, which is becoming a significant cause of deaths and accidents in India and the world. To aware people about this, NSS IIT Roorkee is celebrating the National Road Safety Month 2022 from 22nd January to 21st February 2022. Today, we are here to witness a live session by Ms. Robyn Robertson on distracted driving and road safety strategies for youth. So, on behalf of our whole IITR community, I would like to thank and extend a warm welcome to our speaker for today, Ms. Robyn Robertson. So, Robyn Robertson is the president and CEO of the Traffic Injury Research Foundation, and during her 22 years in the research field, she has published more than 300 reports and articles on a broad range of road safety issues with a focus on education, policy, and program development and evaluation. She has delivered technical assistance for road safety programs in several countries and is the author of TIRF's Knowledge Translational Model. So Robyn is well versed in implementation strategies and operational practices across transportation, criminal justice and health systems, and industry. She is a member of or has served on several academic and professional boards and committees. So we believe her presence will have a profound impact on the participants and attendees and will inspire them. So without wasting time, I would like to invite Ms. Robyn Robertson for the webinar on distracted driving and road safety strategies for youth. So over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for the opportunity to join you to talk about road safety. It's one of the critical issues in all countries that we're currently struggling with. So I'm going to share some of what we've learned around distracted driving, as well as a focus on youth and road safety strategies for youth. So a little bit for adults, a little bit for young people in terms of ways to stay safe on the road. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. There we go. Okay. There, can everyone see that? Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, good. So I'm going to tell you quickly a little bit about our organization. So we are based in Canada. We're an independent road safety research institute, and we focus on road user behaviors. So some of the most significant factors in crashes are human behavior and driver error. So that's really what we spend our time studying. We are set up as a registered charity, and we're governed by a board of directors. Myself and all of my staff are researchers, and we do a couple of different things in terms of collecting data with respect to road crashes in Canada. We also have been very much involved in developing programs and policies with a specific focus on young drivers, as well as impaired drivers. And evaluating programs and policies. And one of the most important things that we do is what I'm doing right now with all of you, which is sharing that knowledge with people to help them make safer choices and to improve programs and policies. So if you're not familiar with Canada, this is an overview of Canada. Where I'm based is actually in the center of Canada, where currently we're dealing with a lot of protests right now, which has been an interesting experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about distraction and some of the key pieces of information we know about distraction. I'm going to share some of the data from Canada, but really it's universal. Distraction is a significant factor in road crashes in many countries around the world. So a little bit about the learning that we have from the data that we've collected, which hopefully can inform your efforts in India, and then talking about some of the specific risks related to young drivers, and more importantly, ways that we can change behavior, some of the tools we can use to change behavior. And also, I'm going to reference a lot of educational resources. We have a range of free resources on our website, which focus on some of the different issues I'm going to talk about. So they're all available to access. So we often take driving for granted in many countries, and because we do it often and we're very familiar with it, we tend not to think about the complexity of driving. And particularly for young people, learning to drive and getting a driver's license is a very important experience, and sometimes they can underestimate the amount of responsibility that goes with driving, simply because when you're out on the road, you are also responsible for the safety of not just yourself, but for everyone else on the road. We do know in countries around the world that young drivers have one of the highest crash risks, and that's as a result of their young age as well as their inexperienced driving. So for that reason, there's a lot of focus around safety programs targeted towards young people. And we also need to pay attention to adults. As parents, we have our children in the vehicle with us perhaps from a very young age, and we show them how to use the roads, not just in a vehicle, but whether you're walking or cycling. And children from a very young age actually learn from their parents. So you may not think at the age of 5 or 6 or 7 that your choices as an adult, as a parent with respect to road safety, are important, but the reality is your children from a very young age are learning from you, and research has shown that as they grow up and begin to use the roads independently, they're likely going to imitate the behaviors they see their parents practice. So it's good to understand that from a very young age, the behaviors of children on the road are shaped by the parents of their behaviors. So we often, because we drive often and use the roads often, we tend to be very comfortable doing that. And I think the main risk factor that we often don't think about is the unexpected. We may drive the same route or walk the same route or cycle the same route every day, and we tend not to pay much attention because we think we do the same thing every day, and we expect it will always be the same. But the reality is, each time you go out on the road, your experience is different. There may be heavy vehicles, there may be pedestrians, there may be construction, there may be bad weather. There's always something that can be unexpected on the road. And for that reason, paying attention is so important, because the difference between a near miss and a collision is actually measured in millimeters and milliseconds. So always being attentive and vigilant to what's happening around you on the road, even if you use the same route every day, is important. Distraction and speeding are particular risks because when we're distracted or when we're traveling too fast, we tend to miss important information in the environment that could be potential hazards. We also have less time to react because we didn't see that hazard soon enough. So distraction and speeding are two important risk factors, particularly for young people, but also for adults. And we know that in Canada, distraction and speeding are some of the most significant contributors to fatal crashes. And that's true not just in Canada, it's true in many countries around the world. There's often the fatal four that we talk about, which are distraction, speeding, impairment, and non-use of seat belts or child passenger seats. So when you think about just driving in and of itself, that's a divided attention task. There are manual components, there are auditory components, and then there's the thinking, the cognitive part of driving. So every time you're on the road driving, you are controlling the vehicle, scanning the environment for information, and then thinking about, is that a risk? What do I do with that? And having to make a decision and physically respond. So just driving in and of itself is a divided attention task. And when we're talking about distraction, what happens when we start turning our attention to a non-driving task is your brain becomes full. You have so much capacity in your brain, and as you start thinking about other tasks unrelated to driving, then you actually can miss important information in your driving environment. Generally, what happens and what research has shown is that your field of view, meaning where you're looking through the windshield of the vehicle, actually shrinks. So you can see on the slide on the left where the driver's not distracted, that box in the middle is bigger and the driver has more information. They can see more what's happening on a larger portion of the road. On the right, you see what happens when a driver's distracted, where they almost get tunnel vision. They tend to look very narrowly, very straight ahead, and miss what's happening kind of around the vehicle, on the sides of the vehicle, where there may be pedestrians, where there may be cyclists, where there may be other vehicles turning. So your field of view shrinks, and that's your brain trying to cope with too much information. And when your brain becomes overwhelmed, it simply starts filtering information out. It's not prioritizing in terms of that's an important piece of information and that's not important. It's just overwhelmed and trying to ignore information so it can process. So your brain essentially becomes full. And when you're distracted, you tend to not perform any of your tasks well, which means your ability to drive degrades. So I'm going to play you a short video which really illustrates what happens when you try and do two different tasks at once. In the video, we've got some participants who are going to try and catch colored bean bags that are tossed at them and sort them according to color, but also answer questions as they go, and you'll be able to see what happens. I'm not going to play. Can you hear that?
What we're
Yeah,
doing is a study on distraction. Mark is holding some yellow bean bags and some red bean bags. He's going to toss them to you. I'd like you to drop the red ones on the ground on your right side.
On my right side. Okay.
Yellow ones on the ground on your left side.
Gotcha.
While he's tossing the bean bags to you, I'm going to ask you some questions. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
What's 7 times 3? You add 5 to that. Can you spell peanut butter? How many rooms are in your home? Can you spell chocolate for me?
CHOCOLATE.
So, how do you think you did?
Mix them up a bit.
Could be better. Could be better.
I had to think about the questions though really hard.
I didn't think I'd forget halfway through which way I was supposed to throw them.
What we're looking at is transferring these two low-level cognitive load exercises from the safe environment out onto the roadway. But when you put the two of them together, consciously or subconsciously, your brain can't actually do both effectively at the same time. So that one moment where you're not quite sure why this ended up on the right side of your body, is this the kid that runs out in a park zone? Is this the wildlife? Is this the person in front of you who suddenly slams on the brakes? Even though you're driving with your hands and your eyes, you need everything else as well, your auditory and your cognitive, to be able to do it safely. When a driver engages in other behaviors while they're driving, they're putting their trust in everybody else on the road around them to do the right thing.
Okay, so that's really a good example of what happens. We often think that we're good multitaskers, and the reality is our brain can only process one thing at a time. So when you're multitasking, what you're really doing is switching your attention back and forth across two tasks, and every time you switch back and forth, your brain loses some of that information, which means your ability to perform the task degrades. You're not going to be able to do it as well. And that's exactly what we saw in the video, where people ended up sorting the bean bags wrong because their brain was trying to answer the question and they couldn't pay attention to the color of the bean bag and sort them at the same time. So what happens when you're driving, most of your mental resources you need for driving are at the back of your brain. And they've done studies where they've put a functional MRI in a driving simulator and had someone drive the course on a route and distracted them with some type of secondary task. And what you see is when they're driving and focused on driving, you can see all the energy and the places at the back of their brain where those mental resources are being used to drive. And as soon as they begin engaging in a secondary task, when they're distracted, you can see actually the mental resources shift from the back of their brain to the front of their brain where they're thinking. And that means there's less mental resources for driving because they're using more of their brain to do this non-driving task. And that's why your field of view shrinks. That's your brain filtering out that information, trying to focus. And it's really just overwhelmed. So when you're distracted when you're driving, studies have shown you actually can miss up to 50% of information on the road. And that's why distraction is a risk and results in collisions. So another important thing to know about distraction is we often think it's just for a second, or it's just, for a few seconds, and my eyes aren't off the road that long. So when your eyes are off the road, or when your brain's missing important information, that means you have less time to respond by the time you do notice it, by the time it becomes more urgent. So in the prime of your life, your ability to physically react to something is a second and a half. And prime of your life is, early 20s. So it takes you 3/4 of a second for your brain to recognize that there is a hazard, that there's something on the road that you need to avoid, that you need to do something. And then it takes another 3/4 of a second for your brain to send a message to your muscles to say, move, start lifting your foot off the accelerator and putting it on the brake. Just start to do that. So that's a second and a half. So that second and a half is important time that you've lost to be able to brake and to try and avoid a collision. And when you think about how fast you're traveling, if you're going 100 kilometers an hour, in just 2 seconds, you'll actually travel 52 meters in 2 seconds. And that's on a hockey rink. I have to talk about hockey because it's Canada, and that's our national pastime. But going from red line to red line, that's 52 meters. You would never skate down a full hockey rink, an Olympic hockey rink, and skate that whole distance with your eyes closed. And yet when you're driving at 100 kilometers an hour and you take your eyes off the road for just 2 seconds, that is how far you're going. And interesting fact about hockey. So we just, the Olympics, our women, we're very proud. Our women just won the gold in the Olympics. And actually, the Indian hockey team has also won a gold in hockey more than once in the Olympics. So I thought that was a really cool piece of information. So as I said, you're going red line to red line, that's 2 seconds. So when you have your eyes off the road, when you're just reaching, for something in your purse, when you're glancing at your phone, when you turn and you're talking to a passenger, we think it's just 2 seconds. And actually it's much longer. So that's why there's so much risk associated with distraction. Some of the other pieces of information we've learned studying the issue in Canada is there are many more people who drive on a hands-free phone as opposed to talking or texting. We still have about 10% of our drivers on our road. We have about 26 million licensed drivers. So 10% of them seems like a small number, a small percentage, but it's actually a very big number because it's 10% of 26 million. So about 10% of our drivers will text or talk on a handheld phone. excuse me, but almost a quarter of our drivers will talk on hands-free, and that's concerning because we know hands-free is not risk-free. There are still elements of distraction and risks associated with distraction with hands-free phones. Also, when we ask drivers about how frequently they drive distracted, the numbers are concerning. And in the last few years, we've seen an increase, particularly in texting. And I think that's in a number of countries. If you're out on the road driving on any given day, or walking or cycling, it's not uncommon to see people on their phone. And that really speaks to the importance of education regarding distraction and how dangerous it is, and the amount of work that we have to do to change people's behavior. Probably the most concerning statistic is about 1 in 4 drivers will admit that they took their eyes off the road for more than 2 seconds. So overall in Canada, as in a number of countries around the world, we've seen a steady downward decline in all road crashes. But distracted driving crashes is one area where we're not making progress, and that's because the issue's relatively new, and we're still learning more about distraction. But yeah, we're not seeing the declines in distracted driving that we have seen with respect to other types of issues like impaired driving or speeding. Yeah, so as I said, currently in Canada, about 1 in 4 fatal crashes involves distraction as a contributing factor. And probably one of the most important things that we've learned is often it's the other road user who gets killed. So when a driver is distracted, it's typically the other driver that they hit, or the pedestrian or the cyclist who's not distracted. They're actually the ones that die. So really, when you are distracted on the road, you have other people's lives in your hands. And the data show really the risk we create for other people on the road when we're distracted. We also tend to focus on young people as being, more often engaging in distracting behaviors. And the reality is they're not. We see distraction across all ages of drivers, from young adults to people who are middle-aged, even to older people. So distracted driving is a universal issue that affects drivers of all ages. And when we're thinking about educating and changing behavior, we really need strategies targeted towards all those age groups. And particularly for young drivers, one of the important risks is having passengers in the vehicle. And we know that the presence of passengers is one of the most common sources of distraction for young people. And we also know that having young drivers with young passengers in the vehicle greatly increases crash risk. So having one passenger really increases a young driver's risk, but then having 2 or 3 passengers, that risk becomes exponential. So for young people in particular, having passengers in the car can be an important distraction. So some important lessons with respect to drivers: when you're driving, it's important to keep your attention on the road and on the driving task to make sure that yourself and everyone else in your vehicle and on the road gets home safely. Use your voicemail, plan your route, listen to music at a reasonable level so that you can hear sirens or other vehicles, emergency vehicles on the road. Make sure you don't have loose objects in your vehicle, because they can be projectiles in a collision. And things like eating and drinking and grooming, those are things to do before you start driving. So as drivers, these are some tools that you can use to keep yourself safe. And for passengers also have responsibilities. So if someone's driving, then the passenger, can be the one who texts or sends the text. They're really a co-pilot to handle everything that's happening in the vehicle, to allow the driver to focus on driving. And as a passenger as well, it's important to speak up if you're with a driver who is distracted. It's important that you're comfortable to speak up and tell them it's not safe to be distracted, and to tell them that your safety is at stake in the vehicle. So it's important that they focus on the road. So it's always important to be able to speak up in those situations. So one of the common questions we get from young people is if I have, my friends in the car, and they're distracting me, how do I tell them to stop and how do I do that nicely? And the reality is it's simply by emphasizing that driving is a serious responsibility, period. And it's not safe to be distracted. There's lots of things young drivers have to focus on in order to drive the vehicle safely, and they're in charge of getting everyone to their destination safely. So when you're in charge, when you're driving, you're really in charge. And if people are distracting you in the vehicle, it's important that you're comfortable and you're confident to simply speak up and ask them, to be quiet and to not distract you while you're driving so that you can all be safe. So with respect to distraction, our website has a number of resources related to distracted driving. We have fact sheets, we have examples of education campaigns. We have a drop it and drive seminar that we do in schools and workplaces as well. We also, in Canada, because of the significance of the issue, formed a Canadian Coalition on Distracted Driving, and these are some of our participants. So it's just a good example of ways that organizations can work together, government and industry, police services, health services, the trucking industry, the vehicle manufacturing industry, can all work together, insurance, to really prevent distracted driving and to help educate people about the risks related to distracted driving. So I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about speed. The issue of raising and lowering speed limits has been discussed in the last decade in many countries around the world. And there are some people who've argued that speed limits should be increased, that we should be able to drive faster. And the reality is research has shown many times over in many countries, every time where speed limits are increased, fatalities increase, serious injuries increase. So that's a universal finding. There's been a strong push towards lowering speed limits, particularly in urban areas, in order to ensure that pedestrians and cyclists are more likely to survive a crash. So when a pedestrian or a cyclist is struck at 30 kilometers an hour, they are much more likely to survive, whereas if they're struck at 50 kilometers an hour, they're more likely to be killed. So that's really the reason why we've focused in many countries around reducing speed limits. Some of the other pieces of data we've learned with respect to speeding, just like distraction, approximately 1 in 4 fatal crashes involve speeding as a factor. Almost 400 people are killed every year as a result of speeding in Canada. And yet we still find a large proportion of Canadians do it, and some Canadians do it speed excessively. They speed a lot, and we've seen that with respect to the pandemic. We've seen many more instances of what we call stunt driving or street racing, which is where you're doing 50 kilometers over the speed limit, which is very high risks. So often people feel they can speed a little bit. They're comfortable speeding 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers over the limit, but the reality is very small increases in speed greatly increase your crash risk. So going just 10 kilometers over the speed limit doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually doubles your crash risk. And going 20 kilometers over the speed limit actually increases your crash risk 6 times over. So speed's really an important risk factor on the road. Speeding is a risk because it gives the driver less control of the vehicle. It reduces the amount of time you have to react to avoid hazards. And the higher speed has a greater crash severity. So the likelihood that you'll crash as well as the severity of the crash is greatly enhanced when speeds are higher. And that's because all of that physical kinetic energy associated with speed, when you're in a collision and your vehicle stops, all that energy goes somewhere, and it's usually absorbed by the vehicle, by the people in the vehicle, and by the object that's struck. So the faster you go, the more kinetic energy, the more severe the injuries. And again, as I mentioned, when you're distracted, or when you don't recognize the hazard in time, or when you have less time to respond, it's less likely that you're going to be able to avoid a crash. So just some examples with respect to how much distance you need to stop when you're going at a particular speed. So those blue bars that you see, that's the perception reaction time. That's how long it takes for your brain to figure out you need to do something and begin to respond. And then the gray portion of that bar is the actual distance you need to brake. So you can see the difference between going 50 kilometers an hour, you'd need about 35 meters to stop. Whereas when you're going, 90 kilometers an hour, you need 83 meters to stop. So really significant increases in the amount of distance you need to stop when you're going at faster speeds. We also tend to feel comfortable speeding because we tend to think a lot of things, we rationalize, and our rationalizations are often myths. So a lot of people will tell you they speed because they're going to get there faster. And the reality is they're not. They might get there seconds or minutes faster, but they're not saving any appreciable amount of time. So you're not getting there any faster in a significant way. People feel because they're in control that they're safe, but the reality is speeding does kill, almost 400 Canadians a year. People feel if you drive the speed limit, you're not speeding, but the reality is those speeds are not targets, right? You're not supposed to aim to drive that fast. If road conditions are poor, if there's bad weather, then you need to drive under the speed limit and not at the speed limit. And people believe that their car will protect them. Cars are made better and safer today, but the reality is, with a significant speed, you're still going to end up being killed in a collision. And the amount of protection your car can offer can be limited depending on the speed and the nature of the crash. So again, we have a number of tools, we have a number of blogs, fact sheets with respect to speeding if you're interested in learning more about the issue. And a lot of these pieces of information are universal in terms of your crash risk, in terms of, what happens when two vehicles traveling a particular speed collide, and some of the takeaways in terms of how to reduce speed and how to avoid risk. So a number of free resources to share information with people and, give them the opportunity to discuss the issue. One of the last things I'll talk about is fatigue driving, simply because it's a risk for young people in particular, because they need more sleep as they're growing, when they're teens and becoming young adults. And for those of us adults who work long hours, fatigue is also an issue, and the pandemic seems to have added to that. So the most important thing to know about driving when you're tired is that you can't predict when you'll fall asleep. And that's why it's so dangerous. And a lot of the things that we do to try and wake ourselves up, whether it's drinking coffee or listening to loud music or opening a window, that doesn't help. It's not going to have any appreciable impact. And to help you understand kind of the risk associated with fatigue driving, most of us have had the opportunity where we've been, watching a sports game or a movie on a couch on a Sunday afternoon, and all of a sudden you fall asleep and you wake up and the movie's over or the game's over and you didn't even know that you fell asleep. That's the perfect example of why it's dangerous to drive while you're tired, is you can't predict when you're going to fall asleep. So some of the signs of fatigue, obviously yawning, you're rubbing your eyes, they're tired, you notice yourself not being able to pay attention, losing concentration, slower reactions. Those are all signs of fatigue. that tell you that you need a rest. And the safest thing to do when you're driving, when you're tired, is to pull over in a safe spot and take a nap for 20 minutes and just kind of refresh. Some of the types of mistakes that you make when you are driving when you're tired is you stop checking your mirrors, your side mirrors for your lane changes or your rear view mirror. You start drifting in and out of your lane. You may miss the exit you're looking for or turns. You tend to drive at an inconsistent speed. You're faster, slower, or brake suddenly. And then you don't remember the last few kilometers that you've driven. So if you're tired when you're driving, and some of these signs and that sound familiar, really the safest thing you can do is pull over. Okay. Also, again, we have some blogs with some interesting facts with respect to fatigue driving and also distracted driving. So shifting a little bit to talk about learning, how do we educate people about the risks on the road, and what are the things that we need to think about to get them to understand the risks. So some of the important things to know is that people learn in different ways. Some people learn by listening to someone talk. Some people learn by watching a video or looking at pictures or graphs. And then some people learn by physically doing. So for example, the beanbag test I showed you. Some people have to do that type of test to experience it for themselves. So it's important when you're thinking about road safety education to cover all of those pieces to accommodate people who learn visually, people who learn by listening, and people who learn by doing. And when you give people the experience of practicing what it is that you've taught them, it gives them an experience, an opportunity to reflect on their own behavior. So for example, doing the beanbag test, explaining why distraction is dangerous, and then doing the beanbag test and allowing people to experience that can help them think about their own driving behavior and recognize some of the things that they might do in the vehicle that are distracting. So that's a good strategy to encourage people to self-reflect, because that is kind of the basis. They need to recognize there's a problem in order to be motivated to change their behavior. So that motivation plays an important part in whether or not people are willing to learn new behaviors and to practice them. If you're looking for information in terms of how to support an educational strategy, one of the free resources we have on our website is actually a toolkit for communities to develop road safety campaigns. So it's a step-by-step of some of the key pieces you need to know in terms of developing a message and understanding why people engage in a risky behavior, so you can message to them in a way that responds to that reason they do it. And it also talks about how do you evaluate the campaign, how do you brand the campaign, and how do you disseminate the campaign. So it's a good piece that communities can use to develop their own road safety campaign based on the latest research. So this is just what the toolkit looks like. It comes in a series of 6 or 7 fact sheets in the toolkit that are the step-by-step process. And some of the interesting pieces is it summarizes the research about what we know about effective road safety campaigns and what makes them effective, why they're effective. And then a how-to for how to create that effective campaign. And one of the other pieces in the toolkit, this is a little bit blurry because it's blown up, but this summarizes all the studies, a lot of the good studies that have been done evaluating road safety campaigns. So it talks about what was the message, who was the target audience, how was it disseminated, and then what were the results. So there's some good examples in there to inform the development of a road safety campaign. Some of the other pieces we have are some fact sheets talking about crashes. In different jurisdictions around the world, we talk about crashes and collisions, or we talk about accidents. At least in North America, There's certainly been a shift in how we talk about them, and we really do talk about crashes and collisions and not accidents, because when we call them accidents, it suggests that no one is responsible. But the reality is car crashes and crashes on the road, a majority of them are caused by or human behavior and driver error play a role in more than 90% of those collisions. And because we know what contributes to those collisions, that also means we can prevent them. And that means they're not accidents. So certainly in North America, there's been a big push around talking about them as crashes, because crashes suggest that someone is responsible, and focuses attention on behaviors and risk factors that result in crashes. We also have just some key facts if you want to start a conversation with someone about distracted driving. Then this is an important piece to give you some of those key facts to start with. And we also created a fact sheet that talks about changing behavior when it comes to distraction. We also are releasing a vodcast series, so a video podcast series, and we've got a series of them that we're going to be released around distraction and speeding, workplace safety, and how do we share the road with more vulnerable road users like cyclists and pedestrians. So that's another resource that's available on our website. So I guess the most important takeaway is that drivers of all ages on the road can create risk, or they can reduce risk on the road by their choices. And young drivers need to learn in a safe environment. They need to begin practicing in a simple environment in low risk, residential neighborhoods, not a lot of traffic, and gradually move to more complex tasks, driving in more urban centers, busier and bigger intersections, and learning to drive on the highway. So they need that stepwise approach, so that they can practice those skills as they're learning them, and gradually become more comfortable driving in more complex environments. And parents can play an important role in shaping the behavior of young people and how they use the roads by modeling good behavior right from the beginning. Most importantly, last takeaway is all of you have the power to change the behavior when you make safe choices on the road, and when you speak up and talk about why you make those safe choices on the road. You actually influence the people around you to make safer choices as well. So I think you guys do a very good job focusing on social issues and supporting road safety education. And I hope the information I've shared with you has been helpful and will be useful to further inform strategies. So I will stop there, and I saw some questions popping up as we went, so I'd be happy to answer them.
So thank you very much, ma'am, for giving us this opportunity to learn from your knowledge. It was indeed very enlightening to hear from you all this while. So now we would like to move on the question and answer session. You can drop your questions in the chat box.
We have few questions. The first one is, you mentioned about distraction. The use of mobile phone on the roads is a major distraction. So what could be the ways to solve this issue or reduce the usage of mobile phone apart from just awareing the people about this?
So in Canada, we've made a number of initiatives with respect to laws to ban handheld phones, and we also ban hands-free phones for young drivers. So that's been one step forward. Unfortunately, we've focused more on the penalties and increasing penalties for those laws. So as a criminologist, I can tell you not all of us are influenced by penalties. So legislation has been a good first step, and we have seen effectiveness in terms of reducing some of the risks related to phone, but we definitely need to do a lot more with respect to education. And I think employers play an important role to shape the behaviors of employees to ensure that they're safe on the road, whether they drive, a commercial vehicle, whether they, drive for their job in terms of sales or home health care or real estate, or whether they're simply driving to and from work, regular commute. I think employers can play a role in shaping behaviors.
Okay, so thank you. The next question is, as you have showed that distracted driving is a universal issue and every age group is affected by this. So why isn't such that experience in case of driving makes the driver more aware of this and reduce the distractions and the road accident?
So sorry, with respect to age?
Yeah, like in the presentation you have showed that it's a universal issue and every age
Yeah.
group is affected by this in a similar way. So
Yeah.
isn't that the experienced drivers, like who have the experience of driving for so many years, why don't their experience comes handy in this such case and make them aware about this and reduce the distractions so that they may not get distracted?
Yeah, so I think even with experienced drivers, the challenge is convincing them that they're distracted. Because often if you drive a lot, right, you tend to feel like you're comfortable and confident, and you may have done it before many times. And I think that's the important piece to communicate to experienced drivers is every day the road is different. There's that unexpected I talk about. So helping drivers realize it's not that I've not been in a crash because I'm good, right? I'm a good driver and I can handle my phone while I'm driving. It's simply you're lucky. You haven't been in a crash yet. All it takes is that one moment where the unexpected happens. So I think that's what we need to overcome to get the message to more experienced drivers, is help them realize it's not because you're a really good driver and you're able to talk on your phone and drive. You've just been lucky. So yeah, so I think that's an important message for experienced drivers.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. The last question is, according to you, what's the most important thing we as youth should do to follow road safety and avoid distractions?
So one of the most important things you can do to affect change is actually to speak up to your parents, to your peers, to talk about why you choose not to drive distracted. And I think we have the opportunity to make change much faster, to make progress much more quickly. When you think about drinking and driving, we've spent 30 years focused on that issue. We don't have 30 years to change behavior when it comes to distraction. So I think teaching people about road safety from a very young age, and then empowering them with those facts to speak up about why they make choices, to inform their parents and their peers and their family members about the risks, and to ask them, don't be distracted. I'm in the car, I'm the passenger, my life is in your hands. So I think it's very powerful for youth to be able to do that.
Like I have also one question, like as you showed in the presentation that reducing the speed limit can reduce the number of accidents. So why can't the governments make the legislation further regarding the same so that they reduce the speed limit on the roads so that the accidents may reduce? Why isn't such happening?
So in North America, a number of communities have actually done a lot of work to get legislation changed to reduce speed limits. So often more communities now in residential and in school zones have reduced the speed limit to 30 kilometers. And again, it's really about people in the community speaking up and talking about why speed is a risk, and how it plays a role in crashes. And like I said, speaking up about why you choose not to speed. So I think the government needs to see the research. So the good news is we have the research, but then they also need the community to speak up and talk about why they want speed limits lowered, to keep their residents safe.
Thank you. There are no more questions. Aditi, you may continue.
Okay.
So thank you so much, ma'am, for taking out your valuable time for this incredible webinar. And the participants truly enjoyed your enlightening presentation and surely learned a lot. You also highlighted how human behavior and drivers' distraction may put the life of everyone on road at stake. So the audience have also learned about what the statistics are and how speed is an important factor influencing the crash risk. So thank you so much, ma'am, for everything.
Okay,
So now
great.
so now I would like to invite Prof. Premlata Jaina, Faculty Advisor, NSS IIT Roorkee, to present the vote of thanks. So over to you, ma'am.
Am I audible? My voice is audible?
Yeah, ma'am, clearly.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditi, for giving this opportunity to send my vote of thanks today. So first of all, yeah, a very good, afternoon and morning. So at your side, it is different timing. So Madam Robyn, Robertson, so I'm here, Dr. Premlata, faculty in the Department of Electrical Engineering. So presently, I'm working as a faculty advisor for NSS IIT Roorkee for this prestigious wing. So thank you so much. First of all, we all together, I mean, whole IITR community, NSS IITR community, we really you're fortunate. We are very fortunate to have you today for this session. And we extend our, the heartfelt thanks to you to spending for your valuable time out of your busy schedule, ma'am. It was really good, wonderful session. I was listening to you for long, first started from 11 a.m. here in Indian time, IST. So it was very, very, very helpful. In fact, we have recorded this video and it's also streaming in our social media. So I'm very sure that all the youngsters, our young leaders, our future of our country, nation, they will be helpful by listening your very valuable terms and sentence and thought process. And most importantly, your women you're leading in this front, I really say my warm wishes for your future endeavor as well. And not on that, I just want to spare something from our side that NSS is not leading this, this road safety month. Also, we have different social activities like blood donation camp. We have, educational platform. We have rural development platform. So we have different, sustainability conclave on energy, water. So women and child education part. So many things we are leading, ma'am. This is for your information. So thank you so much for sharing your valuable thought process. You are always most welcome to our future events, future programs. So mostly I think in March we have this social summit. It's a social cultural activities. So you are most welcome for that event. From our end, I extend my feelings to you. Please join again wherever. Okay, and it is very nice to listen to you. Yeah. So again, happy. Yeah, it's a very pride moment for all of us, right? So we are living in this band. Yeah. So I encourage to do more and more research and could be successful in this field. And most importantly, what actually the services we did last 1 month, starting from 22nd of January to 21st February, mostly we're reaching to the end of this. But however, this was a really the master stroke ending event. So 21st February, we are just ending it. So thank you so much for your kind words. Very nice.
Okay.
And
Thank you very much for having me. It was very much a pleasure, and I appreciate all the good work you do with respect to road safety. And you know where to find me if I can be of help.
Yeah, so it was very nice, very positive vibe. I could sense from your face, your teaching, your speaking. So everything is very nice. Thank you so much. And also I thank to all our faculty staffs, my dear students. So they are listening for 1 hour. So thank you for joining today's session, and thank you to our NSS whole team. And mostly this, I'll just take the name Anuraz. So he's leading this team. And I just want to have a for this clapping for everyone, for Ma'am Robyn and for Anuraz, for everyone, for Aditi, for our NSS team whole, for everyone, please have a round of applause. So thank you so everyone. And I hope that this video will be shared soon, and everyone will be beneficial by listening this video. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for giving this opportunity to me, at least, to say thanks to Madam today. It was very nice. Robinson, Madam. Very nice. So wish you happy Women's Day. It is coming ahead on 8th March. Okay. So nice.
Okay.
So we'll get some time, the time is now improving, so you can have a visit to us. You can have a prior invitation on our side. So please visit. Okay.
Okay,
Right.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you so
Bye
much.
now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aditi. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anuraz.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so thank you, ma'am, too, for providing us with this opportunity, and thank